One night, out of boredom, I decided to join the trend and record a cringeworthy TikTok video. I used a popular song as the background music. Is your bed too big, brother? Are you scared sleeping alone? Just give me a call, and I'll be right there at your door. After recording, I watched it a couple of times and casually posted it on Facebook. It was just for fun, but I never imagined what would happen next. An hour later, I received a message from Niles Clifford. Niles, the guy I'd been secretly in love with for a year and a half. His message was brief but left me utterly shocked. Bed's big. Not scared. Come down. I stared at my phone in disbelief for a moment, then rushed to the window. My heart was racing. Trembling, I pulled back the curtains and peered down. My heart skipped a beat. Niles was actually there, right outside. I lived on the first floor, and from about 3 meters up, I saw Niles wave his phone at me and mouth 2 words, "Come down." I practically flew down the stairs. I ran up to Niles, out of breath, and when I saw his face, I suddenly realized I wasn't wearing any makeup. Niles stared at me for a while, then suddenly closed the distance between us. "Miriam Wilkinson, I almost didn't recognize you." I paused for a moment, then asked with a hint of confusion, "Do I look that bad without makeup?" Niles put his hand on my face, his tone neutral. "You know the answer to that." Niles really did take me back to his place. His house was big, and the bed was big too. He pushed me onto the bed and leaned over me, his hand on the headboard, almost encircling me in his arms. "So, is my bed big enough?" Niles asked, his eyes dark, almost gritting his teeth. I nodded, bewildered. It was then that I vaguely noticed Niles seemed to have been drinking. And quite a bit, by the looks of it. My heart started racing again. Late at night, with the man of my dreams drunk and within reach, it was hard not to let my imagination run wild. However, Niles seemed to be truly drunk. Before I could make a move, he stared at me for a moment, then suddenly kissed me without warning. I was incredibly nervous. What should I do? Should I politely refuse, or should I take charge and pin him down? But Niles didn't give me a chance to consider. He held the back of my head with one hand, deepening the kiss, while his other hand slid to my waist, his palm burning hot. Good heavens, things seemed to be spiraling out of control. Then, in a daze, I ended up in bed with him. Afterwards, satisfied, he rolled over and fell asleep. I, on the other hand, was exhausted from his attentions but had to force myself to get up and clean up the aftermath. Good heavens, it's not enough that this man is handsome, but why does he have such a great body too? It was too intense earlier, I didn't have a chance to appreciate it. Now that Niles is asleep, I secretly examine him from top to bottom. From his eyebrows and eyes, slowly moving down to his collarbone, then to his chest muscles, abs. The man I've been craving for so long is now lying in my bed, at my mercy. I run my hand over his abs, feeling the firm muscles. Not bad at all. As my gaze moves lower, the duvet blocks my view. However, before I can see anything, the hand gripping the duvet is suddenly caught. With a quick movement, the duvet falls back into place. I look up in surprise to find Niles, who was sound asleep just moments ago, now awake and staring at me intensely, his eyes hazy with alcohol. He raises an eyebrow and pulls me down on top of him. "Miriam Wilkinson, learning to sneak attack, are we?" With that, Niles pulls the duvet over both of us. As dawn approaches, I rub my aching lower back, feeling like I might cry. The next morning, I'm woken by the sound of a ringing mobile phone. It's Niles's. He fumbles for it under his pillow, still groggy from sleep. Out of curiosity, I lean in to take a peek. It's a WhatsApp call. The contact name is interesting, Baby. At a glance, I notice the profile picture vaguely resembles me. All those feelings he stirred up last night instantly vanish. So I was just a stand-in, a free shag? My gaze towards Niles changes in an instant. Niles, of course, notices. He glances at me, frowns, and hangs up the call. However, within a few minutes, the phone rings again. He hangs up once more, this time turning off the phone entirely. The room falls eerily quiet. I pull the duvet up to cover my chest and look up at him. "Was that Your girlfriend calling just now? If it really is his girlfriend, doesn't that make me the other woman? Niles shakes his head. Ex-girlfriend. You cad. Niles looks bewildered. Cad? He frowns, then flips me onto my back, pinning me beneath him. Explain. How am I a cad? I try to push him off, but he's much stronger. I turn my head away and snap. Ex-girlfriend or not, you still call her baby. And you've got a baby but you're messing with me? You're a cad. Is that all? Isn't that enough? Niles is silent for a moment. The next time I try to push him, he rolls off me, sits up against the headboard, and lights a cigarette. She really is just an ex-baby isn't my pet name for her, it's her WhatsApp username. I pause, still not quite believing it. Who uses that kind of username these days? The atmosphere grows tense again. I turn to look at him, summon my courage, and snatch the cigarette from his hand. I take a drag, pretending not to care as I ask. So, what are we now? Niles counters with his own question, what do you think? I think. I glance at him, testing the waters. Friends with benefits? However, this probe was clearly a mistake. Niles's face darkens instantly. He grabs my hand, his gaze intense. Miriam Wilkinson, after what we've done, you think that's all we are? I uncomfortably pull my hand away and throw the question back at him. Well, what else? Niles stares at me for a long time before finally gritting out, girlfriend. I have to admit, my heart skips a beat. With just a few words, we've defined our relationship. I sit on the edge of the bed, lost in thought as I hold the cigarette butt, while Niles has already gotten up. He takes the cigarette butt from my hand and tosses it in the bin, then stands up. The duvet slips off as he moves, and I instinctively glance down, my face instantly turning bright red. Oh my! Is this really something I get to see for free? After getting dressed, Niles goes to the bathroom to freshen up. I, however, can't get out of bed yet. My clothes were torn last night and are unwearable now. I grab a nearby towel and wrap it around myself haphazardly, then pad barefoot to Niles's wardrobe. I open the doors and scan the contents. Not a single piece of women's clothing. With no other choice, I end up picking out 2 pieces of men's casual wear that don't look too expensive. However, halfway through getting dressed, the bathroom door suddenly opens. I was startled by him and hurriedly put on my clothes. Of course, the clothes belonged to Niles. He had just taken advantage of me, yet he came around to face me, bending slightly and looking me in the eyes. Why is your face so red? I lowered my head, but heard his low chuckle above me. Who was it last night hugging me and saying, brother, look how long my legs are? It wasn't me. It definitely wasn't me. Niles laughed softly, so wild last night, and now you're shy? I shrank my neck, not daring to speak. Fortunately, Niles stopped teasing me and took a small step back, saying with a smile, go freshen up. As he spoke, he glanced at the ill-fitting clothes I was wearing. You've got good taste, picking the most expensive set. This was clearly the least conspicuous outfit in his wardrobe. After freshening up, I came out wearing Niles's clothes. What would you like for breakfast? I'll go buy it. No need. As he spoke, Niles suddenly grabbed my wrist, his fingers tightening, and I was pulled down onto the bed. I thought someone as wealthy as Niles would have caviar or smoked salmon for breakfast, but I never imagined I was his breakfast. Niles, satisfied and sated, finally let me go. He calmly sat on the edge of the bed and smoked a cigarette, then ordered takeaway. The sudden transition from longtime crush to boyfriend was a bit hard for me to process. While Niles was smoking, I cuddled up to him, half playfully and half warningly, making him delete the contact babe from his WhatsApp. Fully dressed, I straddled Niles's lap, cupping his face as I questioned, was she really your ex-girlfriend? Niles was silent for 2 seconds, then admitted it without hesitation. It was back in university. Before deleting the WhatsApp contact, I carefully examined the photo in the profile picture. On closer inspection, she didn't seem to look much like me after all. I specifically asked Niles about this. Do I look like your ex-girlfriend? He looked me up and down. Miriam Wilkinson, her waist is slimmer than yours, her legs are longer, her eyes are bigger, her mouth is smaller. How are you alike? I took a deep breath and glared at him, Niles Clifford. He leaned in to hug me, his hands wandering mischievously, but you're prettier than her. Really? Niles didn't say anything, but his actions answered for him. I thought that one day I might have to deal with Niles's ex-girlfriend, but I never imagined that day would come so soon. In the evening, I was preparing to go home, but Niles insisted I stay with a firm attitude. As luck would have it, it was a stormy night with pouring rain, thunder, and lightning. I was a bit scared, so I didn't resist much and stayed over. However, in the middle of the night, someone suddenly entered the room. Half asleep, I was suddenly embraced by someone. The scent of unfamiliar perfume filled my nostrils as the person held me tightly, their hair tickling my face. In the dark room, I groggily woke up. As I opened my eyes, I heard a strange woman's voice above me, tinged with tears. Niles, I've missed you so much. What's going on? I pushed away the person holding me. It was the middle of the night, and I was sound asleep when suddenly a woman appeared and hugged me. Who wouldn't be scared in such a situation? I felt a warmth around my waist before I could react, and Niles Clifford pulled me into his arms. He seemed to be still half asleep, his voice hoarse. What's wrong? As he spoke, he paused, also noticing the woman standing by the bed. Niles reacted much faster than I did. He first held me with one arm, then turned on the light. The bright light was dazzling, and the three of us stared at each other in bewilderment. We were all stunned. The woman in front of us, with messy hair and red eyes, wasn't she Niles's ex-girlfriend, that posh beauty? I was stunned for a moment, then looked her up and down. It seemed Niles was right that day. Purely in terms of appearance, this girl indeed had a slim waist and long legs. Her big, watery eyes were now red, and I felt a bit sorry for her, let alone Niles. No one spoke, and the three of us remained in this awkward situation. Finally, Niles broke the silence. He frowned, whether intentionally putting on a show in front of me or not. His tone was cold. How did you get in? The girl stood pitifully by the bed, wringing her hands. I still remembered the passcode to your flat, so I tried it. As she spoke, she glanced at me. I didn't know you had a girlfriend now. Niles's ex-girlfriend seemed to have been drinking. There was a faint smell of alcohol in the room. After saying this, she bit her lip and began to sob quietly. Her tearful appearance made me feel a bit sorry for her. On impulse, I pulled a tissue from the bedside table and handed it to her. She looked quite pitiful. Beside me, Niles tightened his hand on my waist and leaned over to whisper in my ear. Miriam Wilkinson, you're quite the compassionate one. I gave an awkward smile but didn't say anything. I've always had this habit since I was young. I tend to be quite sympathetic towards girls, especially pretty ones like her. The girl took the tissue and weakly said thank you while still sniffling. Niles's brow remained furrowed as he rubbed his temples. From what I knew of him, this gesture meant he was very impatient at the moment. You should leave, Niles suddenly spoke. I was startled for a moment and instinctively prepared to lift the covers and get out of bed. But as soon as I moved, he pulled me back. Niles glanced at me, squeezing the flesh at my waist. I told her to leave. What are you doing? I thought he meant for me to leave. But then I thought, no matter what, I'm Niles's official girlfriend now. Why should I make myself seem so inferior? Thinking this, I didn't move and nestled in Niles's arms, tilting my chin up to look at the tearful girl in front of us. Niles spoke again, you should go out first. I'll put on some clothes and we'll talk in the living room. Hearing that Niles wasn't wearing clothes, his ex-girlfriend's face paled even more. She bit her lip and turned to leave. She even thoughtfully closed the door for us. As I was lost in my thoughts, I suddenly heard Niles's voice. Miriam Wilkinson, your heart is as big as your belly. As he spoke, he pinched the flesh on my stomach. You were about to give up your place just now. Aren't you afraid I might rekindle things with her? Of course I'm afraid. I've been eyeing this dream guy for so long, and I finally got him. We haven't even had enough time together yet. It would be such a loss if someone else snatched him away. But Niles's ex-girlfriend wasn't playing by the rules. She was like a weak, innocent little white rabbit with no ulterior motives. Her eyes would turn red before she even spoke. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Niles started to get dressed in front of me, then grabbed my wrist. Come out with me. Not wanting to appear too petty, I politely said, it's okay, why don't you go by yourself? I don't mind. But I do, he replied. When we went out, his ex-girlfriend was sitting on the sofa, quietly crying. This girl cried without making a sound, just big tears rolling down her cheeks. Seeing us approach, she casually wiped her tears and voluntarily moved to a single chair, leaving the sofa for us. As soon as I sat down, I heard her speak, asking slowly, "Are you Niles's girlfriend?" I instinctively glanced at Niles. Niles didn't even look at me, but reached out to intertwine our fingers, which was as good as confirmation. Seeing Niles's action as a statement, I nodded, yes. I thought Niles's ex-girlfriend was about to make a scene, but she just nodded and then sincerely said, I'm sorry, I didn't know he had a girlfriend. Today I suddenly found out Niles had blocked me. I was upset, so I drank a lot, and in my confused state, I came to his flat. This was completely different from the catfight I had imagined. Niles held my hand tightly throughout, and he only said two things. I have a girlfriend now, so I deleted all my ex-girlfriends to avoid any misunderstandings. You should go home. I'll call you a taxi. As I sat beside him, I silently raised an eyebrow. All ex-girlfriends? How many exes must one have to so casually use the word all? After Niles finished speaking, the face of the little white rabbit ex-girlfriend across from us instantly paled. She looked like she wanted to say something, glancing at Niles, then at me, but in the end, she said nothing. She just wrapped her coat tighter and nodded. No need. I'll call a taxi myself. With that, she turned and walked towards the door. Suddenly, just as she was about to reach the door, she turned back and ran over. I was startled by her sudden action. She ran up to me, grabbed my hand, and said sincerely, Miss, please take good care of Niles. He has a sensitive stomach, is a bit of a clean freak, has a cold personality, and can be quite sharp-tongued. Please be patient with him. Hearing this, I guessed it would be one of those long-winded admonitions, ostensibly advice but actually meant to irritate. Subtly telling you, see, I know him so well, we have so much history that you weren't part of. However, it seems I guessed wrong again. It was just this one sincere piece of advice, she didn't say anything else. Instead, she genuinely complimented me, Miss, you're really beautiful, even without makeup. Then, she took one last look at Niles and turned to leave. Even when closing the door, she did it gently, as if afraid of disturbing us. This seemed to be, indeed, a pure and gentle girl. However, encountering such a rival actually made one feel at a loss. I turned to glance at Niles, only to find him sitting beside me, watching me with great interest. My heart skipped a beat. I leaned back slightly, creating some distance between us. What are you smiling at? Niles raised an eyebrow. I didn't realize my girlfriend was so compassionate. Just as I was about to speak, a sudden clap of thunder sounded from outside. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, the booming particularly deafening. Remembering that the girl had left without an umbrella, I felt a bit worried again. Turning to look at Niles, I whispered, should we go down and check on her? A young girl, who had been drinking, leaving alone in the middle of the night seemed pitiful. Niles looked at me, hesitated for 2 seconds, then nodded. With his agreement, I started searching the room for an umbrella. Before I could find one, he wrapped his arm around my waist. Niles leaned in close. Miriam. I raised an eyebrow and turned to look at him. Yes? However, as I turned, I met Niles' particularly serious gaze. He raised his hand and gently ruffled my hair. What happened between her and me was a long time ago. Don't worry about it. I was too lazy to change the passcode, and I never thought she'd remember it after only visiting once. My mom and her mom are best friends, so I couldn't just ignore her when she was in trouble. He paused for a moment before continuing, I'd have a hard time explaining if something happened to her. I was taken aback. Was he afraid I'd be jealous? I'm not very good at handling these somewhat tender moments. After a long silence, I managed to squeeze out a sentence. Stop with the useless talk. Letting me touch you a bit more would be better than anything else. Niles' face instantly darkened. Niles and I grabbed umbrellas and hurried downstairs. A few minutes later, we were immensely grateful for the decision to go down. We had walked around the building with our umbrellas but saw no sign of her. Just as we were about to head back, we heard the faint sound of the girl's tearful voice from outside. "Let go of me. I've called someone." My heart sank. Niles and I exchanged a glance before quickly running towards the sound. Outside the building, in a corner near the edge of some bushes, a man dressed all in black was forcefully pulling Niles' ex-girlfriend's hand, trying to drag her towards another building. Seeing her shout, he attempted to cover her mouth with his other hand. Niles rushed over, quickly overpowering the man in black, while I ran to hold the umbrella for his ex-girlfriend. The young girl was shaking with fear, her clothes soaked from the rain. Her face was pale as she huddled against me, her hands ice-cold. The man was drunk, likely a resident of the complex, otherwise he wouldn't have been trying to drag Niles' ex towards the neighboring building. After subduing him, Niles walked aside to make a phone call. When he returned, Niles glanced at her, then came to my side and patted my shoulder, saying softly, "Let's go back first." I nodded and helped the young girl back to Niles' flat. Even then, she was initially reluctant. You should just drop me off at the complex entrance. I'll get a taxi home myself." "Why?" The girl sneezed and said quietly, I'm afraid you'll think I'm deliberately causing trouble to stay here." I was taken aback. I'm not one to overthink things. If she hadn't mentioned it herself, I wouldn't have even considered that possibility. In the end, it was Niles who spoke up. "I have many spare rooms. Stay for the night, and we'll take you home in the morning." As he spoke, Niles ruffled my hair carelessly and said to his ex-girlfriend, "Don't worry, my wife is quite open-minded. She won't think too much about it." I have to admit, those 3 words, "my wife," were indeed quite pleasing to hear. And so, Niles' ex-girlfriend returned home with us. Niles arranged for her to stay in the guest room, gave her a few brief instructions, and then returned to our bedroom. I knew he was trying to avoid any suspicion. Drenched by the rain and frightened, the young girl was terribly cold. I quickly urged her to take a hot shower. After her shower, she came out wearing her wet clothes again instead of using a towel. When I asked her about it, she smiled shyly. "Your boyfriend is still here. If I came out wrapped in a towel and ran into him, it wouldn't be appropriate." In just a couple of hours, her way of referring to Niles had changed to "your boyfriend." But despite her words, the fleeting sadness in her eyes when mentioning Niles couldn't be hidden. In the guest room where she was staying, we sat face to face and chatted for a while. During our conversation, I learned that her name was Lucy Bennett and she had dated Niles in university. After they broke up, she went abroad and had only returned last week. I wasn't wrong in my guess. Lucy was a sheltered rich girl, a pampered princess who had grown up being doted on. Even her trip abroad had been entirely arranged by her family. To be honest, I couldn't understand why Niles had suggested breaking up in the first place. A girl like this, not just men, even I found her captivating. Halfway through our chat, there was a sudden knock on the door. Niles' voice came from outside, "Miriam, come back to bed." I responded, but I noticed Lucy's eyes instantly dimming. She forced a smile and gently pushed my arm. "Go on, it's late. You two should get some rest." I nodded, comforted her with a few words, and then left. Following Niles back to our room, as soon as the door closed, he turned and pinned me against it. Niles' right hand cupped the back of my head, his hand resting against the door. "Miriam Wilkinson, you kept me waiting." His voice was low, his lips brushing against my ear as he spoke. I pushed him away, fleeing to the bed, diving under the covers and quickly wrapping myself up. "I'm going to sleep. Good night." After a few seconds of silence, Niles' voice rang out, gritting his teeth, "Good night." Not long after Niles climbed into bed, I fell into a deep sleep. However, I, who never usually woke up in the middle of the night, suddenly awoke in the early hours of the morning. My hand instinctively reached out to the side, the space beside me was empty. Sleep instantly dissipated, and I sat up abruptly, looking around the room. No one was there. I couldn't help but think of some possibilities, but I told myself it wasn't possible. Barefoot, I walked to the door and gently pushed it open, only to see the living room light was on. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't control the jumble of thoughts in my mind as I slowly opened the door and walked out, my imagination running wild. Would Niles be in his ex-girlfriend's room? Would they rekindle their old flame? I tiptoed out barefoot, feeling like a thief. The living room light was on, but no one was there. I instinctively glanced at the guest room door, which was closed, concealing whatever was inside. However, I heard a sound coming from the balcony. I crept over quietly but froze when I saw Niles. He was standing on the balcony, smoking, with a video playing on his phone. The sound seemed familiar. I snuck up behind him and peeked over his shoulder. To my surprise, the person in the video was me. Oddly enough, judging by my hairstyle in the video, it must have been from a year ago when I first met Niles. How did he have a video of me from back then? As I was lost in thought, Niles suddenly turned around. My unexpected appearance clearly startled him, causing him to flinch. Once he realized it was me, he leaned in close again. "Why are you awake?" he asked softly, his arm wrapping around my waist with practiced ease. As he spoke, his gaze fell to my feet, and his tone changed. "Why aren't you wearing shoes?" He was about to scoop me up in his arms, but I quickly stopped him. "The floor isn't cold." "There's no need for a Princess Carrie, that's a bit over the top. Life isn't a romantic comedy." I couldn't quite accept those dramatic displays of affection at every turn. Niles rolled his eyes at me but didn't insist on carrying me. Instead, he quickly pulled me away from the balcony. "You have no sense of romance. Who says girls have to love romance?" I retorted, giving his bum a playful squeeze. I then remarked, "Niles, why is your bum so firm?" I meant it as a compliment, but Niles' face instantly darkened. "Miriam Wilkinson, remove your hand." I pouted and moved my hand from his bum only to casually feel his chest. The sensation was surprisingly good. What a treasure of a man! However, before I could withdraw my hand, I met Lucy's gaze. She was standing at the guest room door, peering out. I froze for a moment, quickly pulling my hand back and awkwardly saying, "Do you need something?" Why was everyone up in the middle of the night? Lucy snapped out of her daze, shifting her gaze from my hand. Her face reddened slightly. "No, I just wanted to use the loo." I hurriedly pulled Niles aside to clear the way. "Go ahead then, and get some rest after." Lucy nodded and walked past us to the bathroom. I noticed she was still wearing her damp clothes from earlier. She hadn't changed into the clothes I'd given her from Niles' wardrobe. What kind of girl was she? Before I could ponder further, Niles dragged me into the bedroom, locking the door behind us. Without a word, he pulled me onto the bed. Before we got in, he brushed the dust off my feet with his hand. "Miriam Wilkinson," he said, his hand on my waist, slowly creeping upwards. "Are you really this open-minded?" His touch tickled, making me squirm and push him away. "What do you mean?" Niles nipped at my lips. "Getting along so well with my ex, are you really that generous?" I leaned in, running my tongue along the corner of his mouth. "Is now really the time to discuss this?" Niles froze. Being so close, I could clearly see the fire in his eyes slowly building. Then, he captured my lips. After playing with fire, I slept until late morning. The wall clock was nearing 11, but Niles was still sitting by the bed, a folder of documents in his hands. I sat up groggily. "Why are you working here?" Niles glanced at me. Avoiding suspicion. My morning mind took a few seconds to realize he was referring to Lucy. I got up to freshen up, then opened the door, intending to invite Lucy downstairs for breakfast. However, I found the guest room door open and the room empty. After searching the entire flat, there was no sign of her. Instead, I discovered that both the guest room and living room had been tidied up, and there was a note on the dining table. The handwriting was elegant and beautiful. "Miriam, thank you for letting me stay last night. I don't want to impose, so I've left. Take care." After breakfast, at my insistence, Niles drove me home. I was still wearing his clothes. At the entrance to my apartment complex, Niles stopped the car, resting one hand on the steering wheel as he turned to look at me. "Do you really have to go?" Despite his stern expression, his eyes and the quirk of his brow betrayed his reluctance to let me leave. He looked almost endearing. I need to rest a bit. Work starts tomorrow, I said. Shall I come with you? Niles leaned in closer. No. I refused firmly, pushing him back with both hands on his chest. You've worn me out these past couple of days. I need to recover, I said, looking at him seriously. Niles took hold of my hands and leaned in again. I promise I won't touch you. I rolled my eyes at him. It's me I don't trust to keep my hands off you. Niles seemed a bit exasperated but obediently let go of my hands. Call me if you need anything. All right. In the end, it took 3 goodbye kisses before he finally let me leave. I practically fled into the apartment complex after getting out of the car. I've come to realize that whenever Niles and I are together, it's like lightning striking the earth. One careless moment and sparks fly, quickly becoming an uncontrollable wildfire. One of us openly flirtatious, the other secretly passionate, we truly are a perfect match. As I entered the lift, lost in thought for a moment, a stranger hurriedly stepped in. He was wearing a hat and face mask, obscuring his features. He made a motion as if to press a button, but upon seeing the floor I had selected, he lowered his hand. The movement seemed natural enough, he must be heading to the same floor as me. I didn't think much of it, glancing down at my mobile. Just then, my phone vibrated with a message from Niles. Miss me already? I couldn't help but smile at his teasing we'd only parted 2 minutes ago. As luck would have it, the lift arrived at our floor. The doors opened and I stepped out, replying to the message as I went. However, just as I entered my flat and was about to close the door behind me, it was forcefully pushed open. Before I could react, I saw the masked man from the lift burst in. I barely got out a word before he slammed the door shut, completely cutting me off from the outside world. Instinctively, I tried to turn and run, or at least make it back to my bedroom. But he moved incredibly fast, grabbing my wrist with one hand and pulling me into his arms. The next moment, a somewhat familiar voice spoke in my ear. Miriam, it's me. I froze, my struggles weakening slightly. He straightened up, using his other hand to remove his mask and hat. The face was indeed familiar, my ex-boyfriend. Have I stumbled into some sort of ex-lovers reunion lately? Why are Niles and my former partners suddenly popping up everywhere? My ex-boyfriend, Owen Clifford, had left for abroad without a word 2 years ago. Even our breakup had been nothing more than a phone call. I can't deny that his sudden departure had hit me hard at the time. It took me a long while to truly get over it. And now, here was this man who had vanished for over 2 years, standing before me with a look of deep affection. Miriam, these past 2 years. I've missed you terribly. To be honest, hearing those words made me feel a bit sick. Don't. I waved my hand dismissively, we've been apart for over 2 years now. It's best not to say such things. Perhaps the disgust in my eyes was too obvious, as Owen stepped forward. Miriam, you're still upset with me, aren't you? Seeing that I remained silent, Owen might have taken it as confirmation. He moved closer, reaching for my hand. Miriam, the truth is, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to let you go. That's why I had to be so harsh. I came to find you as soon as I returned. Where have you been these past couple of days? I've been waiting outside your building. I had zero interest in listening to this long-winded explanation and was about to interrupt when there was a sudden knock at the door. Owen paused, instinctively glancing back at the entrance. I walked past him to open the door. On the other side stood Niles, holding his phone in one hand and an elegantly wrapped box in the other. It looked like a cake. Niles wore a smile, though I noticed his gaze narrow slightly when he saw Owen beside me. While Niles' expression didn't change much, I noticed his lips pressed together ever so slightly. This was a sign of his displeasure. Just as I was considering whether to explain the situation right then and there, Niles walked in, bypassing Owen and coming straight to me. He handed me the cake and then casually draped his arm around my shoulders. The movement was natural. Have we got company, darling? He asked. If any other man had called me darling, it might have sounded a bit cheesy. But when Niles said it in his deep, velvety voice, with such a serious expression, it truly made my heart flutter. I nestled into his embrace and said, "It's my ex-boyfriend." Niall's expression remained unchanged, though. The arm around my shoulders tightened a bit. "Do come in," Niall said with a faint smile, his gaze fixed steadily on Owen. "Let's catch up." Owen's face had turned quite sour. He and Niall stared at each other for a moment before he turned to look at me. "Miriam, you've hired this man to fool me, haven't you?" I couldn't help but laugh. Had 2 years of studying abroad addled his brain? How could I have found an actor who arrived within 2 minutes when you've been here for less than 5? Owen was about to say something else, but Niles went straight for the knockout blow. He cupped my chin and, without a word, kissed me directly. Right in front of my ex-boyfriend, Niles gave me a passionate French kiss. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Owen Clifford leave with a grim expression. The door slammed shut, but before I could take a closer look, I felt a tickle on my waist. Niles Clifford gently pinched the soft flesh at my waist. "No distractions allowed." Then, he pulled me into the bedroom. We entered while kissing all the way. I was still holding the cake, swaying as we walked in. When we reached the bed, Niles finally took the cake from my hand and casually placed it on the bedside table. Well, Miriam Wilkinson. I leave you for 10 minutes, and you bring your ex-boyfriend home, HM? He came in on his own. However, this explanation obviously didn't convince Niles. On the contrary, his brow furrowed even deeper. "He has a key to your flat?" Throwing caution to the wind, I straddled his lap, cupped his face, and bit his lip lightly. He followed me in. At first, I thought it was a burglar. I was terrified. Niles raised an eyebrow. "And when you saw it was your ex, you weren't scared anymore?" Unable to win the verbal sparring, I could only take action. I pushed Niles down on the bed and started unbuttoning his shirt. Niles's body noticeably stiffened. "What are you doing?" I glanced up at him, but my hands didn't stop. "Shutting you up." Niles didn't resist, looking like he was sacrificing himself. "Go ahead." I thought the ex-boyfriend storm had passed quietly, until, on Monday after work, Owen cornered me at the office entrance. With a huge bouquet of flowers. In our nearly 3 years of dating, he never knew I was allergic to pollen. As I was leaving work, I was texting Niles about dinner plans. He had a meeting and would be coming to see me later. Just as I walked out of the office building, Owen approached with the flowers. I felt a headache coming on. I turned to walk in another direction, but I heard footsteps behind me, and he blocked my path. Owen thrust the flowers into my arms without a word. "Miriam, I've thought about it for a long time. I don't want to lose you. We broke up because I left without saying goodbye, but now I'm back. Let's get back together, Miriam. Your current boyfriend isn't right for you." He looked at me quietly, his expression gentle, just like 2 years ago. For a moment, I almost felt like I was back then. Back then, we did have some sweet times. The feelings were naive but sincere. That's why I found it so hard to let go of his sudden departure. If he had just said the word break up, I would have let him go cleanly, not holding him back. But he kept it from me while quietly making arrangements. Even when he boarded the plane, I was still planning for our weekend trip. I stood there holding the flowers, stunned for a few seconds. Coming back to my senses, I looked up at him, my expression completely unmoved. "Actually, the past is in the past. But since you bring it up, I just want to ask one thing. When you hid it from me back then, was it because you were afraid I'd hold you back?" Owen was taken aback. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, he just lowered his gaze and nodded. I smiled and handed the flowers back to him. "Then you really didn't need to worry. If you had told me the truth back then, I would never have held you back." Owen became anxious. He held the flowers with one hand and tried to grab mine, but I pulled away. "Owen, can you stop doing these things that only impress yourself?" I stepped back, frowning at him. "You're just making me feel grateful that we broke up back then." Perhaps this statement hit a nerve. He stood there motionless. I gave him one last look and turned to leave. But as soon as I turned, I heard his voice from behind. "Miriam." I stopped and looked back at him. Owen's expression was off. Finally, he held out the bouquet of lilies. "These flowers, please take them." I looked at him silently for a couple of seconds, then chuckled softly. "Thanks, but I'm allergic to pollen." Leaving Owen with a stunned look, I turned and walked away, this time with unwavering determination. To be honest, when I saw that familiar face from my memories, I admit I had a moment of softness. But I already have Niles by my side. Niles is more handsome, has a better body, and probably has more stamina too. What reason do I have to look back? Of course, I'm guessing about the last part. We were young back then, and our relationship was limited to hugs and kisses. I don't know about Owen's stamina, but I guess it's not as good as Niles's. I hadn't walked far when Niles called. I smiled at the 2 words flashing on the screen and answered the phone. However, Niles's lowered voice quickly came through. "Miriam Wilkinson, you're allergic to pollen and you still took flowers from your ex?" How did he know I had just been holding flowers from Owen? And how did Niles know about my pollen allergy? I instinctively looked around, but despite the bustling street, there was no sign of Niles anywhere. Then, his voice came through the phone again. "Don't bother looking, I'm not there." As I walked towards the pavement, I asked him, "Be honest, who tipped you off?" Niles chuckled softly and confessed, "Your boss." I knew it. Our boss has been fawning over Niles terribly. Ever since he found out that I was supposedly with Niles, he's been treating me like royalty at work. He must have been terrified when he saw a strange man giving me flowers. As we spoke, Niles' tone grew more serious. "Are you feeling unwell?" "I'm coming over now." I was taken aback. "Why are you coming?" "To take you to the hospital." Out of habit to avoid troubling others, I instinctively refused. "It's fine, I'll just pop into the chemist's for some medicine." "Besides, don't you have a meeting?" As I was speaking, I suddenly heard voices on the other end of the line. Listening carefully, it seemed someone had come to remind Niles about the meeting. However, Niles didn't hesitate for a moment. "Cancel the meeting. Reschedule it for tomorrow morning." "But tomorrow morning?" No buts. After Niles spoke, there was silence on the other end. I held the phone, hesitating for a moment before saying, "Niles, I can go to the hospital myself, you don't need to." Before I could finish, he interrupted me. "All right, stay put and wait for me like a good girl. Miriam Wilkinson, we'll settle the score about you accepting flowers from your ex later." I didn't have to wait long before Niles' car pulled up to the curb. The car door opened, and Niles quickly got out. Instinctively, I pulled my hands behind my back. The allergic reaction had already started, especially on my arms, which were itching terribly. I didn't want him to see. But as soon as Niles got out of the car, he walked straight over to me, grabbed my arm that I had hidden behind my back, and rolled up my sleeve. Seeing the red, spotty rash on my arm, Niles frowned, took out some ointment from his pocket, opened it, and gently applied it for me. After finishing with my arm, he looked up at me. "Where else is itchy?" I lowered my head, my face. He dabbed some ointment on his fingertip and carefully applied it to the itchy areas on my face. I couldn't see, and started to panic. "Is it on my face too?" Niles didn't say anything. I grew anxious. "Is it serious?" "I won't be disfigured, will I?" Niles meticulously applied the ointment for me, taking a moment to look up at me. "Now you're worried? You weren't so concerned when you were accepting flowers earlier." I leaned in to look at him. The man I sleep with is just so handsome. So, on the busy street, I couldn't resist. I leaned in and quickly kissed him. Niles froze for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. "What are you doing?" He deliberately kept a cold expression, but the tips of his ears had turned slightly red. He averted his gaze and continued applying the ointment. He was embarrassed. As he was applying the ointment, I leaned in and whispered in his ear. "Niles, you look quite cute when you're jealous. I really want to pounce on you." Niles' hand froze in midair, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. He gave me a deep look, the fire in his eyes dying down only to reignite. He gritted his teeth and said, "Miriam Wilkinson, you'll pay for those words sooner or later. I promise." The medicine Niles bought worked well, and the itching subsided almost immediately after application. Nevertheless, he still dragged me to the hospital for a checkup. Only after confirming that the allergy wasn't serious did Niles finally let me off the hook. On the way back to my place, Niles remained silent, focusing on driving, though not particularly fast. While waiting at a red light, I turned to glance at him and saw his hand resting on the steering wheel, his fingers tapping lightly in rhythm. "What are you thinking about?" I broke the silence. However, Niles didn't even look at me as he said in a low voice, "I'm thinking about how I should punish you later." He deliberately emphasized the word punish and gave me a meaningful look. As Niles' car approached the entrance of my apartment complex, I quickly tried to stop him. "You can drop me off here, I can go up by myself." But Niles didn't slow down at all. He turned to look at me, his eyes dark and intense. "Miriam Wilkinson, are you scared now?" As he spoke, he slightly increased his speed. "However you started this fire, you'll have to take responsibility for putting it out." After we got home, despite my protests, Niles insisted on coming up with me, and then this petty man made me pay the price with his actions. I originally thought that dating Niles Clifford wouldn't be easy, given his wealth, good looks, cold demeanor, and sharp tongue. However, we unexpectedly clicked, both in personality and physically. Niles isn't good with words, but he's actually quite thoughtful on the inside. He quietly arranges everything, and his gentleness is reflected in the little details of daily life. Nevertheless, even the calmest pond can be disturbed by a single pebble. And Owen Clifford was that pebble. At 8 p.m., I received a phone call. The number was familiar. It was the one Owen had used a few years ago. After hesitating for a moment, I hung up, but he called again shortly after. I frowned and answered. "Hello, is this Miss Wilkinson?" An unfamiliar voice came through the phone. I sat up in bed. "Who is this?" "I'm the pub owner. Your friend is drunk here. Could you please come and pick him up?" I frowned. "I'm not close to him. Please try calling someone else in his contacts." However, just as I was about to hang up, the owner suddenly called out, "Wait, wait." The owner's voice sounded quite urgent. "Your friend's phone only has your number in it. You'd better come over. He hasn't paid his bar tab yet." With that, the owner gave me the pub's location. The call ended, and I sat silently at the head of the bed for a long time before finally changing clothes and getting up. I didn't have any grudges against Owen, nor did I want to be friends with him, but we weren't enemies either. I couldn't just leave him to fend for himself. By the time I arrived at the pub, Owen was already nearly unconscious from drinking. After settling his bar tab, I managed to get him out with the help of the pub's security guard. It was the middle of the night, and I couldn't very well bring him back to my place. Luckily, there was a hotel right next to the pub. With great effort, I half carried, half dragged him over there. I have a habit of always carrying my ID card, so I used it to book a single room. I intended to just dump Owen on the bed and leave, but as soon as I managed to get him onto the bed and before I could even turn around, I saw Owen open his eyes, and then he grabbed my wrist tightly. His grip was so strong it hurt. Owen looked at me with furrowed brows, his eyes hazy with alcohol. "Miriam, please don't leave me. I'm begging you." I tried to push his hand away. "You're awake. Good. I'm leaving now." The bar tab and room cost £83.20 total. "You can transfer it to Lucy." Lucy Bennett was a mutual friend of ours. I knew they were still in touch. However, despite pushing hard against his hand, it didn't budge. "Owen!" I was getting angry. I looked up at him, only to see him pressing both hands on my shoulders, apparently trying to kiss me. His grip was so strong that my shoulder blades ached. I couldn't break free and could only desperately turn my head away as he leaned in to kiss me. His lips brushed past my earlobe, making me feel nauseated. "Owen, if I'd known it would be like this, I wouldn't have bothered even if you drank yourself to death in that pub." I glared at him, truly angry. The more I compared, the more grateful I felt for having met Niles. Unable to break free, I took a deep breath and deliberately asked Owen softly while he was emotionally agitated. "Owen, during these years abroad, did you ever think of me?" As expected, Owen nodded eagerly, looking desperate to prove himself. Of course. Miriam, you don't know, I've missed you so much these past 2 years. Really? I nodded, softening my tone. I believe you. Owen's grip on my shoulders loosened a bit. What about you? He asked me in return. Did you ever think of me? I looked at him quietly. Come closer, I'll tell you. Sure enough, drunk people generally don't have much intelligence or logic. Owen obediently leaned in, and at the same time, he unconsciously released his hands from my shoulders. The moment he leaned in, I swung my arm back and slapped him hard across the face. Owen, I stepped back 2 paces and looked at him with a frown. I don't want this money anymore. This slap makes us even. What happened between us is in the past. If you still feel guilty towards me, then don't make me think back to my first love and feel utterly disgusted. Having said my piece, I turned and walked towards the door. I imagined Owen might break down, curse loudly, or keep trying to explain himself. Whatever his reaction, I had no intention of staying to watch. However, what I didn't expect was, just as I reached the door, Owen suddenly rushed over, pinning me tightly against it. His drunken voice in my ear sounded somewhat crazed. Miriam Wilkinson, you're just after his money, aren't you? My dad's ready to let me come home and inherit his company. I'm richer than him. Tell me, how much to sleep with you for one night? Have you gone mad? I cried out in shock, struggling desperately, but Owen's strength was terrifyingly great, perhaps due to the alcohol. My struggles seemed insignificant under his restraint. I was genuinely panicking now. It had been 2 years since I'd seen Owen, and now he was drunk. Who knew what he might do? Unable to break free, I lowered my head and gripped his arm tightly with both hands, biting down hard. Owen loosened his grip in pain, but just as I grabbed the door handle, he violently threw me aside. Owen was breathing heavily, completely blocking the doorway. Not wanting to engage in this pointless struggle any longer, I quickly took out my phone and dialed Niles's number. Earlier, Niles had set himself as my emergency contact on my phone, so one press connected the call. Niles always answers calls quickly. It only rang once before he picked up. What's wrong? To be honest, the moment I heard Niles's voice, I felt like crying. Of course, now wasn't the time for tears. Niles. I'm at the Jiangwan Road Hotel, room 308. Owen, he. However, Owen didn't give me a chance to finish. Halfway through my sentence, he rushed over and snatched my phone, smashing it violently on the ground. The phone shattered instantly. That's it. I didn't know if Niles had heard me clearly or not. Fortunately, after dropping his phone, Owen didn't immediately rush over, but stood in front of me, watching. To keep him calm, I had to compose myself and try to communicate with him. Owen, I really don't understand. If you truly couldn't live without me, why did you leave so abruptly 2 years ago? Even if you chose to go abroad, it's just a few years. I could have waited. But you chose to end this relationship directly, and what's more, you called to break up with me only after you had already left the country. I took a deep breath and looked up at him. If you didn't love me that much, then why are you doing this now? Why act like you can't live without me? Owen stared at me for a long time. Then, I don't know if it was the alcohol numbing his brain or if something I said had struck a chord within him. After a long silence, he pressed his hand against his forehead and confessed. Miriam, actually. I went abroad with Noah that year. The night before we left, she and I. Owen didn't finish the sentence, perhaps finding it difficult to put into words. So that was it. Owen was my first love, but I wasn't his. It was Noah. I heard that their love was once so deep it was etched in their bones. But when Owen and I got together, he had sworn with his hand raised to the sky that he and Noah were a thing of the past. So, you chose to leave without a word and break up so cruelly just to be with Noah, and now you're back looking for me because she dumped you again? Owen nodded, then quickly shook his head. No, that's not it. I was the one who broke up with her. These 2 years abroad with her, I couldn't stop thinking about you, Miriam. I truly can't let you go, that's why I came back. I estimated the time. Niall's place wasn't far from here, but it would still take him a while to arrive. Thankfully, Owen was very calm at the moment, not making any rash moves like before. I kept my distance from him, stalling for time by chatting about random topics. Until suddenly, there was a loud banging on the door, and Niall's voice from outside, cold as ice. "Open the door!" The moment I heard Niall's voice, I felt a surge of strength. I pushed Owen away and ran towards the door. But I only managed a couple of steps before he grabbed me. As I struggled, Owen looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "Miriam, have you really fallen in love with him?" I desperately tried to push his hand away, and I couldn't be bothered to answer that question. "You're mental." I managed to break free, and outside there was the sound of someone kicking the door, then suddenly, the kicking stopped, followed by the sound of a card being swiped. The door swung open. Niles stood in the doorway, his face terrifyingly grim. That day, Owen was beaten badly. I had never seen Niles so angry before. He pinned Owen to the ground, throwing punch after punch. Owen never fought back, not even once. Of course, I didn't try to stop it. I stood leaning against the wall, my mind blank. I was regretting it. Regretting that I had stupidly rushed over here to help him, only for things to turn out like this. I swear, when I got the call, I didn't think much of it. Our mutual friend Lucy wasn't in town, and the bar owner said Owen's phone had no other contacts. He also owed money for drinks, so I came to help out. I thought I'd just pay his tab, get him a room, and be done with it, so I didn't tell Niles. But this turn of events was indeed unexpected. It's my fault too. If I had decided to cut all ties, why did I even bother about his well-being? "Niles," I called out softly, "let's go." Hearing my voice, Niles' fist stopped midair. He withdrew his hand and got up, walking over to me. Owen's face was already bruised and swollen. I took Niles' arm, and we turned to leave. Just as we reached the door, Owen's voice suddenly came from behind, a bit muffled but still audible. "Miriam, I'm sorry." I stopped in my tracks but didn't turn around. "If you're truly sorry, then delete my contact and don't bother me again. If we happen to meet on the street in the future, please pretend you don't know me." I don't know what expression Owen had hearing these words, and I didn't want to know. Holding on to Niles' arm, I left the hotel with him. Once we were out of the hotel doors, I finally let out a sigh of relief. However, given the scene that had just unfolded, I felt a bit guilty and didn't dare look at the person beside me. A cold breeze blew past, and suddenly I felt a weight on my shoulders. It was Niles' coat. I felt even more guilty. However, there was no Cold War as imagined, nor any blunt questioning. Niles wrapped his hand around mine, his palm warm, and gently caressed the back of my hand with his fingertips, bringing a touch of warmth. "Let's get in the car, it's cold outside." With that, Niles led me to the car. Once inside, after fastening our seatbelts, I turned to glance at him. Niles's expression was as usual, showing no signs of pleasure or anger. "What are you looking at?" Niles suddenly asked in a low voice. Startled by his question, I quickly apologized. "I'm sorry." Niles didn't say anything but pulled the car into a parking space by the roadside. My heart tightened, fearing this was the setup for a serious conversation. Before Niles could speak, I obediently apologized and explained, "I just received a call from a stranger. The pub owner said Owen was drunk and asked me to pick him up." I told him to call someone else, but the owner said Owen's phone only had my number, and he owed money for drinks. The owner kept pushing, and I didn't think much of it, so I went. I paid the bill and originally planned to get him a single room and leave, but I didn't expect. However, I felt increasingly guilty as I spoke. Taking a deep breath, I voluntarily took Niles's hand. I only went because I felt that, given our past relationship, I couldn't just leave him in trouble. I intended to help quickly and leave, but things developed a bit unexpectedly. Niles remained silent for a long time, making me even more uncertain. I decided to stop talking. "Finished?" This was the first thing Niles said. I nodded quickly, yes, finished. However, just as I was nervously waiting for Niles's reproach, he suddenly adjusted my hair. "You weren't scared, were you?" I was stunned, then gently shook my head. Looking up, Niles gazed at me quietly. Actually, I don't object to you going to pay the bill. To be honest, if Lucy was drunk in a pub and the owner called me, I would also go to help pay and find a hotel, but... Niles paused for a moment. I would go with you. After all, it's necessary to avoid suspicion after a breakup. Today, I suddenly felt like I was getting to know Niles for the first time. This man, who seemed cold and sarcastic, appeared to be gentler than I had imagined. In the car, he didn't blame me at all, but just held my face and said, "Miriam, from now on, you're not allowed to go out alone late at night to meet other men, no matter who it is or what the reason." Okay, I nodded and agreed immediately. Even without him saying so, I would never do it again. Even if Owen were dying on my doorstep, I wouldn't open the door even once. He held my face and leaned in to kiss me gently. "Miriam, I'm a bit jealous." My heart instantly melted. "Miriam, do you want to see what the riverside looks like after 9 p.m.? The riverside? My heart skipped a beat. No, I don't. But Niles just smiled and started the car, but I do. Niles really drove to the riverside, a secluded spot almost like the middle of nowhere. And then, that night, the car shook quite a bit. Today is the 1-year anniversary of my relationship with Niles. However, Niles seems to have forgotten. No flowers, no gifts, not that these things really matter, but he hasn't even uttered the words happy anniversary. It's the weekend, so Niles doesn't have to go to the office. But he shows no intention of celebrating our anniversary. Instead, he says his assistant recommended a new amusement park that sounds nice and wants to take me there. I feel a bit jealous. Again, it's about his assistant. Niles hired a new assistant last month. Though she's a bit flat-chested, she has a slim waist, long legs, a fair and delicate face, and she's particularly young. Most importantly, she and Niles seem quite close. I've hinted at this twice, both directly and indirectly, but he always manages to change the subject with a few words. In the end, I had to let it go. However, I still went to this new amusement park with him, albeit with a sullen mood. But Niles doesn't seem to notice at all. Even after we arrive at the park, he's still looking down at his phone, messaging who knows who. My emotions are becoming increasingly difficult to suppress. So when Niles suggests we try bungee jumping, I agree without a second thought. Niles and I jump together. The staff suggests we could hug each other as we jump. Before I can say anything, Niles embraces me. I make a token struggle, but then I catch a glimpse of the ground below and my heart skips a beat. I don't dare to struggle anymore. Looking at the ground, my anger dissipates instantly. I'm about to change my mind and say I don't want to jump, but it's already too late. At the staff's signal, Niles, that rascal, really does jump with me in his arms. My scream echoes through the air. As we jump, Niles seems to say something in my ear, but I can't make out a single word. It's all drowned out by my screaming. Midair, Niles suddenly releases one hand and struggles to hold something up in front of me. "Miriam Wilkinson, will you marry me?" I stare at it for a moment, and then... The rope reaches its limit and rebounds. Niles and I are suddenly flung upwards again, and the ring in Niles's hand traces a beautiful arc through the air. And falls into the artificial lake below. My shout echoes through the air once more, proposing at a time like this, "Niles, are you mad?" After the bungee jump, Niles and I sit on a bench in the amusement park, with his assistant standing beside us. The three of us stare at each other for a while, then I turn to Niles. "What did you say in my ear the moment we jumped?" Niles frowns, but answers honestly, "I love you." I'm silent for a moment. Whose idea was this proposal plan? Without hesitation, Niles pushes his assistant forward. It was his idea. He said this proposal would be unique, and you'd definitely love it. However, that's not the point. The point is, when Niles just pushed his assistant forward, he pushed him by the bum. But looking at the two of them, neither seems to think anything of it. They're both perfectly calm. Logically, in this situation, the two must have had an intimate relationship. "Niles," I take a deep breath, barely suppressing the urge to cry, "are you seeing someone else?" But Niles is bewildered. "What do you mean, seeing someone? Who told you that?" I sniffle, pointing at his young and beautiful assistant. "Who else?" The person is right in front of me. Niles looks shocked. He slowly looks up, meeting his assistant's eyes, and then they both burst into laughter almost simultaneously. I'm a bit dizzy from their laughter. I quickly grab Niles's wrist. What are you laughing at? Niles seems to realize something and actually puts his hand on his assistant's bum again. You mean, this gesture just now? Niles. He touched him again. Niles quickly withdraws his hand and says seriously, since the proposal is over, let me make an introduction. He puts his arm around my shoulder and glances at his assistant. From now on, she's really your sister-in-law. Then he looks at me. This is my cousin. I'm stunned for a moment, my brain not quite catching up, but I reflexively greet him first. Oh, so you're his cousin. Cousin? Niles nods. I look the assistant over carefully, not daring to ask more, and quickly try to smooth things over. I have a childhood friend who also had surgery, now she's known as a great beauty. I didn't have surgery, the cousin responds, his voice beautifully melodious. If I really had surgery, would I let him touch me so casually? I'm confused. Then I see the cousin twirl his hair with his finger, wink at me, and this time speak in a deep male voice. Sister-in-law, have you ever heard of drag queens? I think I understand now. Although the misunderstanding has been cleared up, the proposal was a complete failure. I can't help feeling a bit disappointed. Beside me, Niles mutters, how did my shoelace come undone, and crouches down to tie it. After a few seconds, I suddenly feel something's not quite right. Niles is wearing leather shoes today. Where did the shoelaces come from? However, when I look down, I see Niles on one knee, holding a ring. He looks at me quietly, a smile on his lips. Miriam Wilkinson, will you marry me? Just this one sentence, no other declarations. But those eyes conveyed so much. He smiles at me, not needing to say anything else, and I feel like I've heard a million love confessions. I extend my trembling hand. Yes, I will. Niles puts the ring on my finger. It fits perfectly. But I'm a bit confused. Didn't the ring fall just now? Was I so nervous earlier that I saw things? Niles smiles. To be prepared for any eventuality, I bought 2 rings. I look down at the diamond ring on my hand, which looks to be several carats, and wince internally, isn't that a bit wasteful? Don't worry, the one that fell was fake. Niles leans in closer to me, smiling. Miriam, is this the time to be talking about that? I'm stunned. Then what should we be talking about? We should. Niles chuckles softly as he leans in, and as I feel the warmth of his lips on mine, his muffled voice says, we should be kissing.